So thank you all very much for joining us. We are here today at the 2021 Greater Tampa Realtors Legislative Wrap-Up. This event is hosted and sponsored by the GTR Government Affairs Committee, and we welcome you here. If this is your first time coming to an event with the association or the Government Affairs Committee meeting, thank you very much for coming. Once a month, we host our regular scheduled meeting as well as a special program where we invite special guest speakers to come to speak to us about issues and updates that are important to us as a Realtor Association, but as well as issues that are going on here in Tampa Bay and throughout the state of Florida. My name is Nico Hohman. I am this year's chair of the Government Affairs Committee at GTR, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. We're excited. We have over 100 people on the call today on the video chat, so we're very excited about today's functionality. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I would like to first introduce our panelists. I'll start with Senator Cruz, and then we'll introduce Representative Beltran. So Senator Cruz, she's a member of the Florida Senate, representing District 18, which covers most of western and central Hillsborough County, including all the way through South Tampa and downtown. Representative Cruz started serving in the Florida legislature in 2010 as a member of the Florida House of Representatives, where in 2018 she served as the House Minority Leader as well. And since 2018, she has served as a member of the Florida Senate. She's a graduate of HCC here locally. She's a fourth generation Tampa native. And outside of the legislature, she serves as a healthcare executive. Representative Beltran, he is a member of the Florida House of Representatives. He represents District 57, which covers much of southern Hillsborough County. He was first elected to that seat in 2018 and then subsequently reelected in 2020. Representative Beltran, he's a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and Harvard Law School, and he and his family moved to the Tampa area in 2010. Outside the legislature, he serves as an attorney. So Senator Cruz, Representative Beltran, thank you both very much for joining us today. We're happy to have you and happy to talk a little bit more about this session, things that happened, things that didn't happen, and kind of where we're going to take the future of the state of Florida from here. So with that, I'll first turn it over to Senator Cruz and then Representative Beltran. Can you give us a 30,000-foot overview of how you saw this year's session shape out? So Senator Cruz, take it away.
Representative Beltran, it's good to see you. It's, we haven't been home long enough, but we'll be back soon, won't we? But let me give you an overview of what I saw. Despite the negative economic impact of COVID-19, we passed a record $101.5 billion budget. And this budget includes $10.2 billion in federal relief for Florida. And the silos kind of break up like this. Health and Human Services, healthcare is about 43% of our budget at about $44.5 billion. Education is 30% of our budget at about $30 billion. Natural resources, environment, transportation is about 14%. General government is only 6%. Criminal justice and corrections is at $5.2 billion. And the judicial branch is at about $667 million. So this included a $1,000 bonus payment to the essential first responders, which everyone is very excited about, and another $550 million to maintain teacher raises, which I think was a priority for all of us. We were all excited to continue that salary at about $47,000 a year for teachers, to help raise some of the veteran teachers' salaries, because for a while in Florida, almost 50% of our teachers were first-year teachers, which meant we were turning over half of our teachers because they just would move on to other positions with their degree so they could make more money. I think everyone knows that the Sadowski funds were cut in half, and that money was diverted to wastewater and some of our sea level rise. And the big issues were the COVID-19 bills for liability protection and an expansion of school voucher programs, diverting more money away from our traditional public schools. And of course, we had election reform and PIP repeal. So I would say that those are, that's basically what we went through for the session. We work a lot together on issues and money to bring home to Tampa, more so than people I think people walk away, Rep. Beltran, you can speak to this too, thinking that we're constantly fighting, but there are a few issues where never the two shall meet. But all in all, we're over there working to bring budget dollars home to Florida, making sure that Tampa Bay is represented well, some bills that protect the people and protect businesses. So we really do a lot of working together.
Absolutely, yeah, and there's certainly a lot that you mentioned that we'll cover a little bit later in the session as well. But thank you very much for giving us that overview. Representative Beltran, from your perspective, kind of give us a big picture overview of this year's session for you.
Well, things went a lot better. It was actually an easier session than I thought. I thought we were going to be doing budget cuts, and that was going to consume most of the session. We did have some COVID stuff. We definitely did the COVID-19 immunity. That was kind of early and done with in session. That was done, I think, week 2. And frankly, we were so busy with other things that it seems like ages ago that we did that. I think that was a good bill. I don't think it's going to impact that much because I don't think there were a lot of people suing in the first place over that sort of thing. And it is what it is. And so the businesses have really reopened regardless of that. And so Florida's been one of the most successful economies but both in general and during the coronavirus. And we're really very nearly back to normal. So that's very gratifying. As Senator Cruz mentioned, we did the bonuses for the teachers, also for the first responders. I was with the governor the other day at the Temple Terrace Fire Station, announcing that those bonuses, as soon as that's signed and the funds are appropriated, we'll be distributing those. So that was very good. We also had 6 new judges for Hillsborough County. Those are slots we'll probably fill over the summer. And we've had a big backlog. First, because we were understaffed for a very long time. The second thing is we bumped the jurisdictional limit for the county courts a couple of years ago. And then the third thing that happened was coronavirus, which slowed down the court. So we have a backlog. Those 6 judges will help us to work off some of that backlog. And that was something I've been working on since I got elected, because the Supreme Court for many years had certified that we needed more judges, but the legislature hadn't really paid attention to that until I started making noise about it. So finally got that. Hopefully that makes it through. We got that last year, but it got vetoed. We got a new courthouse for Tampa Bay. That was another, again, one of those long needed things. I started to get noisy last year. We got it, got vetoed. We did it again. So we'll have a new appellate courthouse for the Tampa Bay area. So that's very good. As Senator Cruz mentioned, I guess with a little bit different spin, but we did expand school choice and merge some of those programs together. So folks will have that opportunity. I think the public schools are doing just as well as they've ever been, but we'll also have that school choice. And we also had some consumer protection legislation. I had a telephone solicitation bill, which outlaws those annoying calls you get about your car warranty or your home warranty, things of that nature. Got that across the finish line. That should cut down on those annoying calls. We also had property litigation reform. We passed that in the last week of session. Hopefully that'll address the increases in the property taxes, insurance rates that we've seen in the past. I will talk about property tax later, I promise, but in the insurance rates, which are, the people are now not wanting to buy homes or not wanting to buy homes in certain areas because those insurance rates are going up. And my district is probably one of the hardest to flood in Tampa Bay, being landlocked, and still our rates went up about 40% last time I checked. So hopefully that'll do the trick. If it doesn't, we'll come back and try something else. We addressed foreign threats. I had a bill to prevent trade secret theft from abroad. Rep. Grawl also had a bill to prevent infiltration of universities. Those passed both chambers. And then we had a lot of money. We had instead of cutting the budget, we actually passed the largest budget, and we've shored up our reserves. Our reserves are actually larger than they were before. Which is good. It's good that we set aside some of that money, and we've used some of that money for some of these one-time things that we need to do. I just hope next year we do return to fiscal conservatism, because we won't have that $9 billion. And I do expect the budget to go down. I don't want 101 billion to be precedent going forward, because that's gonna, that if that was, it would have to be funded by tax increases, and I don't want to put that on our backs or on the backs of future generations. So I'll stop talking now. I could go on, but that's kind of the overview that I see.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you, Representative Beltran. Really appreciate it. So with that, a lot of people don't realize that, something like 3,000 bills are initially filed every year. And, it's whittled down to maybe about 200 or so are actually become law. So Senator Cruz, we'll start with you. Of those 200, which, plus or minus 200, which one of those are you especially proud of, or, would you consider, really good wins for you this session?
That's a great question. I think my best win is Senate Bill 222, which will put a task force together to identify the abandoned cemeteries throughout Florida. I think it's important for a task force to take a look and identify all of the lost souls in these cemeteries that have been forgotten, but especially important as well to what happens if an abandoned cemetery falls underneath or falls within your backyard or falls underneath a business. Richard Gunsmart went through that in Tampa. One of his warehouses is part of the Zion Cemetery and identified bodies on his property. So, this task force needs to take a look at this. No one wants to intern any bodies. We just want to identify the cemeteries and give some respect to the lost souls that are there. But, the issues are multiplicative here. So assigning a task force will be the first step toward identifying and then respecting the dead.
Good. Representative Beltran, same question. Which bills were you especially proud of or pretty excited to see pass this year?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, I had four that'll be enacted. I mentioned two of them: the telephone solicitation and the trade secret theft. Another one that I had was the repeal of the Constitution Revision Commission. As you all will recall, in 2018, you had 7 different propositions that you had to vote on that came from the Constitution Revision Commission. Some of those were compound amendments, which would group something like offshore drilling and vaping together. So if you wanted to ban offshore drilling, but you wanted to keep vaping, or vice versa, you had to take it as a package. And we don't do that ourselves. We have a single subject for our legislation. And if the legislature wants to pass a initiative, and for that matter, if the voters want to do a petition initiative, they all have to keep to one subject. But this CRC is allowed to bundle amendments. And the purpose of that was, originally they created the Constitution. They said, we're going to have this commission meet 10 years later in case we overlooked some things or we needed to fix up some errors. And that's why they were allowed to compound, but it's not been used for that. It's been used for new substantive policy that's gone in the Constitution. And personally, I think Constitution is to protect limited government separation of powers and individual liberty. It's not supposed to legislate on all matters of policy. That's what the legislature is for. And if you make it easy to amend the Constitution, then you can erode those liberties that we do have in the Constitution, and we make it hard to amend the Constitution to protect our rights. So anything we can do to preserve the Constitution is good. So the CRC repeal will, of all things, it will go on the ballot in 2022 because the voters have to approve that before we can amend the Constitution. But hopefully that'll cut down on the proliferation of amendments. And the Constitution is very long, much longer than the United States Constitution, which governs many more people. And I think that'll be a very positive step. And the other thing we've been trying to do for a long time is we have stadium tax subsidies in Tampa and elsewhere. It's great to have sports teams. The sports teams are doing great. Florida's a great place to play sports. I don't think the taxpayer needs to subsidize that. If you want to go to the game, go to the game. If you want to go to the mall or buy a car or do something else with your money, do that. The government shouldn't be involved in that, and doesn't need to be. We have great teams and we're doing great without that sort of thing. So we closed one of the avenues where the sports teams, wealthy sports teams, can get subsidies from the taxpayer.
Good. And so we'll get into real estate specific issues soon, but one more general question, Representative Beltran, we'll start with you. So what are some bills that didn't go through this year, ones that you've been fighting for, or ones that you think should have gone through? Which were some that you're still fighting for these days?
Sure. Yeah. So we had one bill I've been working on for a couple of years was the baby box bill. So we have a newborn infant surrender bill, which says, essentially if the woman is at the hospital, she says, I can't handle this, I'm going to leave, I can't handle the baby, that, the staff will take the baby and care for the baby, put that baby for adoption, and the woman won't be prosecuted if she leaves the baby at some sort of location where the baby can be cared for promptly. So we have that on the books. What we still see, though, unfortunately, in Florida and other states, is we see infants abandoned by the side of the road in a dumpster, places like that. Apparently, those folks were not comfortable doing a face-to-face surrender. And so we passed a law that said, you could have a secure box. The box is air conditioned, it's transparent, it's alarmed, it locks. And you can put that at the fire station or police station or hospital, and you can surrender the baby there up to 30 days after the baby's born without any penalty, no questions asked. They won't accost you. And so that saved lives in Indiana, where it's been widely implemented. And we passed that off the House floor, but we didn't get it all the way to the governor's desk. But we'll be back next year. We did work with some of the stakeholders, and we made some amendments, I think, to make the bill better. And we'll come back next year and try again. But that's an important bill, and that it had bipartisan support. We were unanimous in the House, and I'm lobbying Senator Cruz just a little bit right now, but anyway, so but I think that's a good bill, and hopefully we'll bring that back. So.
Sounds good. And Senator Cruz, the same question for you. So which were some of those bills that failed or didn't quite through that you're still going to be pushing for and want to see come through?
I have been working so hard on a bill that caps the cost of insulin for Floridians. And insulin is a drug that has been around over 100 years, and the scientists that developed it sold the patent for $1 so that everyone could have access to it. If people remember what happened back in the days of the EpiPen, where they were essentially price gouging for the EpiPen because people had no choice, it's the same with insulin. I think one of the realtors that are friends of mine on this call told me her husband spends $1,200 a month on insulin. And there are many small business owners that have policies that have high deductibles and really can't afford it. I spoke with so many families that ration their insulin because they try to make it last longer. You speak with some of the physicians in the emergency rooms, and they will tell you that it's not just one patient that comes into the emergency room in what they call a ketoacidosis, which is a diabetic coma. It's several, and it's every single night. It's a real issue because people cannot afford their insulin. So my bill essentially takes the patient out of the equation, and it will basically force the drug companies and the healthcare companies to come together and figure out a way to make this work by capping insulin at $100 a month so that most anyone that needs it can afford it. And, we're not talking about people that are on Medicaid because they're covered. And we're not talking about folks that work in corporate America that have good corporate insurance. We're talking about that working man or woman, that single mom with a couple of kids who works at a 7-Eleven or an Amscot, that she can have healthcare coverage, but it's $350 a month. And she has to make a decision as to whether she puts gas in her car and buys groceries or covers herself with healthcare. I mean, she can put her kids on healthy care and they're taken care of, but she has nothing, and she goes without healthcare coverage, and she is one of those people that will ration the insulin to make it last longer. It is a real problem in our state and our country. So I continue to work hard on it. This summer, I'm going to pull some of the principals together and see if we can work out a bill that makes everyone happy. No one's ever really happy, but a bill that we can live with anyway. So I continue to fight for that.
Copy that. Well, thank you very much for both of you sharing. Really appreciate it. We're going to pivot a little bit now to realtor specific issues. So every year, for those of you that don't know, the Realtor Association here in Tampa, as well as all the other local boards, travel up to Tallahassee every year, other than this COVID year, to specifically talk to our legislators. All the representatives, all the senators receive a visit from at least one realtor, if not 20, 30 realtors sitting in a room to specifically talk to them about the issues that are important to us. It's highlighted obviously by the big Realtor Block Party that we have, which, like to pat ourselves on the shoulder. It's one of the best parties in Tallahassee. But we go there specifically to talk about issues that are important to us as real estate agents, real estate practitioners, but also the clients that we serve, the individual homeowners, the business owners here in our local community. Every year we have our legislative priorities. Some pass, some don't, and this year is no different. We had some big wins and some others not so good wins. So I'd like to first start with some good wins that we have. Representative Beltran, you talked a little bit about COVID liability protection. That was a big one that we as a Realtor Association, most other business groups were supporting. That one passed. But one that I really want to talk about to both of you was SB 50, and specifically reducing the business rent tax. For those of us that don't know, in the state of Florida, we're the only state in the country that charges a sales tax on commercial leases. For the past several years, Florida Realtors has gone to Tallahassee and tried to reduce that, and we have reduced it slightly over the years. But this year we saw one of the biggest decreases to that. Coming up. So first of all, thank you both for your efforts with that. But Senator Cruz, kind of start us off with, kind of tell us a little bit about behind the scenes with that, and where do you see that legislation going? And then Representative Beltran, we'll pass it on to you.
Well, I want to thank all of the realtors for teaching me more than I would ever know about the rent tax and about the Sadowski funds, because I will tell you that every year for the past 10 years, when the realtors come into my office, we have, they come and educate me, but we have a great time. I really look forward to them visiting the office. And, I see the rent tax on a glide path, and I'm happy about it. I think we may have been one of only 2 states that were still charging lease tax. And all of I know I'm speaking to the choir, that if a corporation has a choice to rent a big building, a big facility in Florida or somewhere that they don't charge the tax, I think that's it's easy to persuade them not to come here. So it's good for business. And I even received a note from my landlord that said my taxes were going down. So it's happening, and I'm excited about it. I'm still worried about Sadowski, but I imagine that we'll talk about that next.
Representative Beltran, anything you'd like to add to that conversation about business rent tax reduction?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you kind of the back room, or the blow by blow, how we came to that. Is it came on top of another bill which we were doing, which was to make sure that we're not disfavoring the mom and pops and empowering the out-of-state big box retailers. And for a long time, we hadn't been collecting the sales tax from those out-of-state big retailers that are selling into the state. There was wasn't really a loophole in the law. We were obligated to pay those taxes, but they weren't being collected, and the consumer wasn't paying that, obviously, because that's kind of cumbersome to do on a consumer level, and the retailers were not remitting those taxes even though they were owed. So we said we were going to enforce it against those out-of-state retailers, and they're going to have to start remitting those taxes to Florida. And so we projected about $1 billion of new sales tax receipts. We said, well, at the beginning of session, maybe there was a temptation to use that to plug some of the budget holes, but by the time that we got the CARES Act funds, or the CARES Act funds were announced, we didn't want to grow government. We said, well, how do we, we have to enforce the law, obviously, and make a level playing field, because the mom and pops are at a disadvantage, and that they have to collect and remit the sales tax. So we want to do that and make it uniform for everyone, but we don't want to grow government or waste that money. So I said, well, what are we going to do? Well, we had to do a tax reduction elsewhere to offset that. And so, among other things, we decided to offset the business rent tax. So that's how it came about. And I was glad we were able to do that. And we got it down to 2%, I believe. And I'm going to take the same position if we do this compact, which is supposed to be 500 million. My position is going to be all that's got to go toward tax reduction. I don't want it. If we're doing the compact and we're taxing the gambling, then we can talk about the policy of the gambling. But if we're going to do that, we need to use those revenues as well to offset taxes elsewhere. And maybe the business rent, it's now at 2%, so it's not that hard to wipe it out. Or we see what other annoying taxes like this. I think there's a stamp tax too. That's kind of an annoying one. We can talk about that a little later. But trying to offset some of these taxes that are in the 9 figures rather than the 10 figures, because that's kind of the amount of money we'll be working with. So
And
that's
also,
how it came about.
Speaking to the 500 million that we'll be collecting, we've been kind of chanting this mantra for a while that, we're one of the few states, it is not a tax increase, it is a tax that we weren't collecting. So we have to remember that next year, we're not going to have $10 billion from the feds, in recovery money. So I think it's smart to look ahead at this compact and say, where can we find new revenues for next year? Because just like Rep. Beltran said, we're not going to have a $101 billion budget next year. It will be much less, probably back down to 90 if I had to guess, but we still have to plug some holes. And so collecting some of these revenues will be helpful.
Perfect. Sounds good. Well, again, I appreciate the effort that both of you put into this, and all the realtors over the years that have, talked to your legislators. Change is possible. It just takes, persistence and enough dedication by enough people to get that change to happen. So we appreciate all of our members that went to Tallahassee and talked to our legislators specifically about that. So we appreciate all your work. Kind of switching gears to another topic that's important to us are the Zadowski funds, the housing trust funds, affordable housing trust funds. They have lots of different names over the years, and every year a little bit different things have happened with the funds, but kind of general same direction. This year, something new happened with how the housing trust funds are dispersed. So Representative Beltran, we'll kind of start with you with that process. Kind of tell us a little bit about where that went, and then Senator Cruz, we'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Sure. So we have documentary sales or documentary stamp tax in Florida. And the purpose of that was originally to put it for affordable housing. Historically, they've just kind of used that for other purposes. And my position's always been, we just be honest about what we're doing. If we want to use it for other purposes, we should just call it a tax and stop saying that it's for the affordable housing, or we should cut the tax and then just fund affordable housing to the extent we do out of general revenues. We shouldn't have a tax and say it's for something and then sweep it and do that. Now, so that's how we started out, that we weren't going to sweep it. By the way, we didn't sweep it last year. And that was my position, but it was, they swept it a bunch of years. And so this wasn't the year where they weren't going to sweep it. But, to talk about the documentary stamp tax, I think it's kind of annoying when you refinance your house, you have to pay this tax. In fact, we had another bill this session about there was a LIBOR. LIBOR is a benchmark interest rate that's used to calculate the interest rate. And if you have a floating rate mortgage, then as LIBOR goes up and down, you have your LIBOR +3 or whatever it is. And so LIBOR, there was a big scandal a couple of years ago. Basically, LIBOR was the way you come up with LIBOR is you ask the banks what amount they would be willing to take or pay in an overnight loan. And so the banks, it wasn't what were the banks actually paying each other, it was what did they say? So the banks started essentially lying to the folks who were putting together the LIBOR amount and in order to manipulate this interest rate. And so LIBOR was abolished. There was a big scandal. There were a bunch of lawsuits, and these folks who have loans or mortgages were having to re-record because you had to have a new mortgage because it had to be based on a different benchmark, and so they were charging taxes for that. So we said, well, if it's because LIBOR was abolished and we're going to use something else, then you don't have to pay the tax on that. But kind of got me thinking the whole tax. I really don't like the tax. We should really do it separately because we're not for years and years, we haven't been doing what we're saying we're doing. So that's my take on that. And I know Senator Cruz has something to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Senator Cruz, please. Yeah.
Of course I do. Well, and to your point, Rep. Beltran, if you're going to collect a tax and you claim that it's for affordable housing, then it should be for affordable housing. And I get very frustrated when I see this year they cut it in half and they're diverting some funds to wastewater and some work on sea level rise. But it's just unfair. Let's rename it. In my opinion, it's deceptive and it's not honest when we collect a dock stamp tax for affordable housing. And, I feel as if we're in an atmosphere that doesn't value affordable housing for working families. And it really frustrates me. So I fight every year. I try. And, I think that the realtors have done an excellent job at elevating this issue. Without you guys, I don't think that we would even be seeing half of that money. So good job to all of you.
So kind of walk us through a little bit now that this, we have the new structure, essentially how the funds are going to be dispersed, kind of walk us through a little bit now how the legislator sees that, being used in the future. And either one of you can take that.
I'll defer to you, Senator.
I don't have any idea. It depends on where the greatest need lies every year, and that shifts. I mean, healthcare costs are almost half of our budget every year, along with criminal justice. It takes a big chunk. We never know what will happen, but I do know that next year will be a tough budget year because we won't have the federal drawdown dollars and some of the recovery money. So it just depends on where the greatest need is where it's been swept in all kinds of directions. And this is not the only trust fund that gets swept. There are several trust funds that get swept every year. I think the only trust fund that legally cannot be swept is the gun fund. All the others are subject to being swept for other uses, but it's just that in Tampa, I can speak for the Tampa Bay area, affordable housing is, I think we're quickly moving into a Florida where people will be renting for many, many, many years because the housing market is just, homes are so expensive right now. And we're in Tampa, we seem to be fighting these mega apartment complexes. It seems, especially in the South Tampa area and south of Gandy, they are just, multi-hundred unit apartment complexes that people are very worried about. So, we want to get people into houses, someone that gets into an affordable home and pays on it for years and creates some equity. In my opinion, it helps. I've seen many people help raise themselves out of generational poverty, or at least leave something behind so that they can raise their children out of generational poverty. But it's a forced savings, in my opinion. And anytime we can help someone do that, we should be working toward it.
Perfect. Thank you. So as we keep moving on, if any of you have any questions for our panelists, please keep popping that into the Q&A. As we come towards the end of our session, we'll certainly ask, for general Q&A from the audience, and I'll be sure to relay those. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and we'll take a look at those. Obviously, housing here in the state of Florida, it's a pretty hot market, and as both of you mentioned, it's increasing in costs. Part of that big increase in cost is insurance, and so Representative Beltran, can you talk to us a little bit about the rising insurance costs, and what are some things that we can do to kind of help stem that rise in costs?
Sure. Well, we've had a couple things. I mean, one of them is we just got hit by a couple storms, right? So that certainly didn't help things. So that's kind of a confounding variable. But the most salient problem we have is we have a litigation environment in Florida. We have a lot of litigation we have a lot of claims, and we have a certain number of frivolous claims. We have those folks who are going around fixing to repair your roof, And, frankly, the insurance companies aren't scrutinizing the claims correctly either. They need to be pushing back on that harder. And every time they come to see me, I say, okay, I understand you're getting sued, but you need to, if it's a frivolous claim, you need to litigate it. You need to try to win. And if it's not at litigation, you need to deny those claims because you guys are paying bad claims. And that's part of the problem. And part of the issue is the attorney fee shift. It's a one-way attorney fee shift. So the plaintiff can sue and they're not going to have to pay fees if they lose, but if they win, they'll get those attorney fees. And then on top of that, there's a multiplier, which the attorneys are saying that they should get not just the number of hours they worked multiplied by a reasonable hourly rate, but there should be some kind of a multiplier because these cases are difficult or risky to do. And the cases really aren't that difficult. There's tens of thousands of these cases. They're not unique. They don't require cutting edge research or thinking of new arguments. They're in fact really the most common type of lawsuit that's filed in Florida. And the fact is there's a very vibrant bar who's pursuing these lawsuits. And in fact, they advertise. And so that's really not something where we need to apply the multiplier. The multiplier might be appropriate in some civil rights litigation on some cutting edge constitutional theory or something like that, but it's not appropriate in this routine property litigation. So we're cutting back on that. And then what we're also cutting back on is these folks are actually going around, not just offering you the free roof, but they're offering you like $1,000 gift card, $500 gift card to this or that store in exchange for letting them inspect your roof or letting you do work. Now, in your insurance contract, you may have $1,000 deductible, whatever your deductible is. The contract and the law say that the roofer or the doctor or the auto body shop or whoever it is required to collect that deductible. That way you don't make frivolous claims. The consumer has a little bit of skin in the game, and they're required to collect the deductible, and they do for the most part. And so, but if you collect the deductible, then you kick that back with something with a cash value back to the consumer. It's basically like not collecting that deductible. So that's another problem. The bill banned that sort of practice. And then what the bill says is if you, in terms of apportioning the attorney fees, you made your offer, they made their demand. If it comes closer, it depends, if the result is very close to the plaintiff's demand, then they get their fees. If the result is very close to the insurance company's offer, then they get their fees. And then there's kind of a no man's land in the middle where you don't shift the fees. And what that encourages is it encourages both the consumer to make a reasonable demand and the insurer to make a reasonable offer, rather than folks staking out these extreme positions that are not warranted by the facts. So hopefully that'll cut down on the litigation and the costs that we have resulting from that. So that's kind of a nutshell. We could talk about it for hours, as I have before, but leave it there.
Fair enough. Senator Cruz, anything you'd like to add to that conversation? Senator Cruz, you're on mute.
Get this to happen. There we go. I think that all of Rep. Beltran's comments are well stated. I will just say that oftentimes, we have the attorneys fighting the insurance companies, and you see exactly what the rep said about these people that work their way through trailer parks or work their way through senior neighborhoods. And, it started out, we fought the assignment of benefits where they were going to say, just sign this. And then that turned into grand litigation, and some of these folks didn't even understand what they were signing. But what happens that I think is really good is that, a bill starts out a bit outlandish in favor of one business or another, but they work on it together. And I think we saw that for most of this session between the trial guys and the insurance companies. And when they walk away and a bill passes and neither side is really happy, completely happy anyway, that's when I think good legislation happens. And I think that we saw that this session.
There was if you don't mind, there was a question in the Q&A, it was kind of related to this topic. If I just jump in and
Yeah, please. I was going to ask that. So
I didn't cut you off, did I?
Mm-mm,
Okay,
mm-mm.
all right. Somebody asked, why don't we have more insurers in Florida? In other words, we don't have a lot of coverage being written by the national insurers that you see on television that may be advertising for homeowners insurance or other lines of insurance. What we have in Florida is we have what they call these monoline insurance companies, and they have a relatively small book, and the book is almost entirely property insurance. And so it's my particular insurer, with all due respect, it's not somebody I knew about till I really looked at my policy and I got into learning about insurance regulation and so forth. And one of the causes of that may be that we have a bad environment, and a lot of companies either don't want to write in Florida or don't want to write in Florida with the type of volume that they otherwise would. And that cuts down on consumer choice. And in fact, some of these monoline insurers are closing or merging or reducing their book. And what we want to do, we want to have a healthy market, because these monoline insurance companies, it's not like AIG or Geico where they have $100 billion. They have a very small book, and then they end up reinsuring, and reinsuring is very expensive. And that is another issue that we've spent time on in Tallahassee worrying about, which is the cost of the reinsurance. But if you have a big enough book, it reduces the need to reinsure. But if all your risk, you have a $50 million capitalization and all your risk is property insurance in Tampa Bay, well, you better have some reinsurance, because you're not diversified across the world the way some of these larger companies that choose not to do business for whatever reason in Florida.
And I know you guys know this, but insurance companies operate on what we call the law of large numbers. And, this many people are insured and this many people actually end up filing claims. And, Florida's high risk. We're higher risk than other states because we are so prone to damages from hurricanes. And, we see climate change happening. We see our oceans and our waters hotter than ever before, which makes these storms stronger and more ferocious. So, we're one of those states that has higher incidence of claims, and that's part of the reason that they're not coming, or they're not quite as available. That's part of the reason that Citizens exists, even though, part of the legislation that we passed that Senator Boyd carried in the Senate was to, try to move so many people off of Citizens and back over to private insurance. So that's what we're working on now.
Sounds good. Well, thank you very much. Thank you both for those answers. We had another question come in about transportation. So a lot of times housing and transportation do go hand in hand. There were some bills that have come out, regarding toll roads, a lot of development with the Brightline rail coming through Florida as well. So can you speak a little bit about some of the transportation issues that were coming up this year and the next couple of years that you're going to see happen? Senator Cruz, we'll start with you.
Okay, that's fine. I think that we have to stop ignoring this. And I think that people that live in the suburbs feel that transportation tax or money only helps people in the urban core. But, we're one of the only airports in a large metropolitan city that doesn't have any kind of mass transit out of the airport. I watch, if you head to University of South Florida for a meeting in the morning from South Tampa, it's an impossibility. You have to leave so much earlier than you did before. We can't keep building lanes on the interstate. We can't keep widening lanes. We have to figure out a way to move people efficiently and economically. But, we just have to take the leap. We're so far behind now. And, we passed the tax, and then it was basically overturned. The money is sitting there. I don't know where we're headed with this, but I think that we have to take a softer approach to transportation. People seem to be in or completely and totally against it. And I think you'll get that perspective from Rep. Beltran.
Well, I'll say this. All right. So we had and transportation is an important issue. I mean, let me start with the easier issue. We had the MCORS project, or the MCORS roads were basically going to go through relatively sparsely populated areas, areas that I don't represent. We have a need both at the West Shore Exchange, which is in Senator Cruz's district, and then a couple of the interchanges over in my district, Gibsonton and Big Bend, which we are working on, and we were able to get federal funds for last year during the coronavirus. So that was important work. I'm proud of that, but still we need to work on some of these surface roads, and some of those are county roads and some of those are state roads. And so the trouble with the transportation tax which was the 1% sales tax that was put on the ballot. I'm never going to raise in people's taxes. I don't like raising taxes. I don't think that's my job. The people raise their own taxes, then I guess that's on the voter. If they agree to raise their taxes, it's not my fault. But other than the fact that it's a tax increase, the problem that I had was that first of all, the tax was to be administered not by the county commission, which is what's required by law, but it was going to be administered by an unelected appointed board, which wasn't going to be accountable to the people. And that was a violation of state law. So that was overturned for that reason. The second issue was that it was they didn't say you could use the money for transportation. They said you had to use the money for these things, and the types of things that they were required to use the money for. Almost all of them were things that were only suitable for a very densely populated area. And my district is more suburban. There's some rural, there's some farms, there's certainly some apartment buildings and so forth, but it's mostly lower density. And really what we need is we have the Alafia River run through my district. There's only 5 crossings over the Alafia River in Hillsborough County. We need more bridges. We need to widen the bridges that we have. We need better interstate interchanges, and we need better surface roads. And we weren't able to use that money for those purposes. And Senator Cruz is right. There's hundreds of millions of dollars that have been escrowed, and that's going to have to be returned to the taxpayer according to the Supreme Court. So we'll see how that's handled. But we need to have things that work for all areas of the county. And that particular tax, not only was it illegal, but it really disadvantaged my constituents relative to the urban core. And I'm not against public transportation. I come from the Northeast. I rode public transportation for many years, and it was practical there. And if there's something practical here that we can do, then I certainly don't oppose that, but certainly not in lieu of providing types of transportation that we need in East Hillsborough. And we do have buses, and we have a bus that goes to the base, and that works well, but that's kind of because we have a lot of military in my area of the county. But other than that, I don't really think it's particularly feasible. Now we have the train, the Brightline train, which you mentioned, and that's something different. There were proposals to have publicly financed trains in the past. Those were not fully implemented, and I think rightly so. I'm not convinced that that's going to work, and I don't want to risk taxpayer dollars, which are not mine. Those are the people's money. It's not mine to risk, and I don't want to risk that on something that I'm not 100% convinced is going to make money. But if a private company wants to come in and invest and risk their capital, and they'll reap the rewards or pay the losses as the case may be, and they're willing to do that, and apparently they are, then that's fine with me. And they've built that up through Southeast Florida, and they want to build to Orlando and come over here. And I say they're not asking for tax dollars, and more power to them. So not opposed to that, but and I'll just leave you with one more thing is I hope that, we're going to have next 5-10 years, we're going to have more self-driving cars, or at least automated lights and things of that nature. And hopefully that will cut down on some of the traffic problems that we're seeing. I think, when the cars are more coordinated and not everyone trying to jam into each other, then hopefully that'll be a partial solution. But that's some ways away. We still need to build the infrastructure that we need right now.
Sounds good. Well, we're coming up on our time here. So both of you, thank you very much for coming. We'll wrap up with one final question for both of you. So if you kind of look into your crystal ball for the rest of 2021 and heading into next year's legislative session, what are some of the big issues, some of the things that should be on our radar for the rest of this calendar year and moving into next session? Senator Cruz?
Well, we are moving into, the census is out, and the onus is on us as a legislature to redraw the lines based on the census. So we're going to be facing reapportionment, which will be very interesting and probably a very big fight. Both sides will want to make sure that they are fairly represented. So I think that will probably consume much of next year. And keep in mind that in 2022, because when we redraw the lines, every line moves. So every senator and every House member is up for re-election. So it will be a very busy election cycle. It will be a very expensive election cycle because everyone will be trying to get re-elected. And, we'll see some lines that are drawn where, one member may be drawn into another member's seat. So we'll see members who are in office that may end up running against each other. But I think that's what we'll see consume most of our session next year, along with, our budget and all of the other issues that we face. I think that reapportionment will be very, very, I think it will probably suck the air out of every room.
Fair enough. Representative Beltran, what's your crystal ball say for the rest of the year?
Well, we're definitely going to have reapportionment next year. Hopefully that'll be an easy process. It's very easy to draw straight lines, and it's we got some weird districts out here in East Hillsborough County. I didn't draw them. I don't like them. So and just kind of by way of background, the districts in East Hillsborough County, the congressional district come in from Polk and they come down from Manatee, Sarasota. The Senate districts come up from Manatee County, and even some of our House districts. My House district starts in the corner and it's pretty regular. The rest of the House districts are kind of, there is one that kind of looks a little bit funny to me. So having said all that, I hope we draw some good, clean districts and try to keep them in Hillsborough County as much as possible, so we're not getting diluted and we can represent our community. And that should be a relatively straightforward task. I'm under no illusion that it'll be controversial for one reason or another, but I wish it would be simpler. We're going to have the special session on gaming. I'm really not sure what's going to happen there. It's not outside the realm of possibility. We would, try to get a better deal for the state of Florida and try to get some more revenues. I think they could probably afford to pay us a little bit more. And so we'll see what happens with that. And then we'll be in committee weeks, late summer, early fall. Obviously I'll be back with trying to do some consumer protection legislation, see if we can apply whatever revenues we have from this, any compact to tax reductions. Probably some more stuff on the Constitution for the 2022 ballot. And other than that, we'll kind of see what happens. I think the economy is very strong, and we will, if people can get off of the idea that $100 billion budget is appropriate, then hopefully it'll be easy. The budget process will be easier. Although I certainly understand what the senators saying, but those are kind of the big issues that I see going forward.
Sounds good. Well, Senator Cruz, Representative Beltran, we both thank you very much. You both have been excellent supporters of the Realtor Association, and we supporters of you. And so if there's anything that you need here locally, anything that you want to know about what's happening with the housing market, with local businesses, with the Realtor Association, our doors are always open. And I encourage our members, if you want to get more involved with the Realtor Association, get more involved with what's happening in your local community, be a part of the Government Affairs Committee, come speak to the legislators. Their doors are always open as well. They have offices both in Tallahassee and here locally. They're always open for you to reach out and talk to them about what's important to you. So if you are interested, we meet every first Friday of the month, the Government Affairs Committee meeting for Greater Tampa Realtors. We encourage you all to come to that. And we will certainly share with you more events that we have coming up in the future regarding the Government Affairs Committee, as well as other things the association is doing. But Senator Cruz, Representative Beltran, again, we thank you both very much for being here today. And we hope that you have a wonderful weekend and have good luck with this special session coming up. So again, thank you everybody for coming. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye now.
Great to be here. Thank you. Have a good weekend.